Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Let us start this lecture with a thought process from Boyd K. Packer, who says, "At temple, the dust of distractions seems to settle out, the fog and the hedge seem to lift, and we can see things that we were not able to see before, and find a way through our troubles that we had not previously known." Today, temple plays a very important role than what it was in earlier days. As we are marred by the market-driven materialism way of life, so therefore, it's a great place to get settled down and discard our worries and get peace of mind. So, in the last lecture we had a very good discussion about how the temples were important in our country and how this temple architecture had evolved over the times that was discussed in the last lecture. Today we will be looking at temple construction technology in ancient India. I will be trying to give you a very brief account of this because this is a very vast topic, and I will try to make certain points which were being followed in northern and southern India. Let us look at why we want to study or why we want to look at today the temple construction of ancient temple, because of fact that some of the earlier temple are still being used by the people. Let us look at Kedarnath temple. Kedarnath temple is one of the important temple because it is one of the 12 Jyotirlingas in Kedarnath valley, situated at an elevation of 3,584 meters above the sea level. And it is also one of the 4 dhams which are being considered auspicious by the people of Hindu religion. And this is your main temple. And if you look at this is a quite old temple, and let me tell you that it has survived over the years, and in recent time there was a flash flood in 2013. If you look at the building which was built on the same place around this Kedarnath town, this building was built around 2012, and let us look at other building. This building which was spoiled by this flash flood was built on 2009, and this building got damaged during this flash flood was built on 2013 itself, and this building was built on 2012. Now question arises, what happens to the Kedarnath temple which was built around 1200 years back according to history? And that was a very gigantic flash flood, and which had destroyed all these buildings being destroyed by this gigantic flash flood. But what happens to temple? Before disaster, this is the temple what I can show you here, this one, right? And if you look at these are the buildings which are built very recently. These are the buildings, right, which are recent buildings. And this is before disaster. After disaster, only temple remains, and most of the buildings are destroyed. And nothing really has happened to this temple, although the temple was closed down for a year just to check is there anything happened to the foundation of this temple. And both the IIT Madras and also the Archaeology Survey of India found out that nothing has happened to the temple. Whereas the buildings constructed by using the modern technology were being washed away. So that is a very important aspect what we need to look at. How did they make these temples, which are subjected to earthquakes, subjected to fast flood, and subject to vagaries of the nature? Still they have survived. So let us look at now the construction of temple structure, which is quite a complex process. It involves arrays of various subjects, and it must be amalgamated properly. For example, like if you look at it, is a combination of art, science, technology, and also the creative study, and it requires a lot of knowledge about geometry and mathematics and logic and geography, geology, ecology, and sculpting and sound and light. Of course, the music is a part of the system. So, therefore, and not only that, one has to also look at religion, social aspect of a particular area, region, and also at that time people were using astrology. So, also today. So, therefore, a person who is constructing should have this kind of knowledge, broad based knowledge, and he should have also depth. Now, that is today we are lacking, because most of the things are really not being practiced today. So, therefore, for constructing a temple we must have requisite knowledge and skills, and that was there at the time, and it was basically passed from generation to generation on a informal way. But however, you can see that that it was not in a very informal the way we think, but it was a better way of transferring the knowledge from one generation to another. And as we go along, we will discuss about more. And but unfortunately, the records are not there, because at that time people were using the palm leaves and other leaves to keep the records, and also using that, but some of them are being destroyed, and some of them might be there in the museums, but unfortunately those are not really accessible to the general people, and I am not sure whether that, but however, there is evidence of the temple drawings and some calculation, which I will show you just briefly, and they have some kind of evidence you can find in certain details about the temple construction. Let us look at, like this is about a palm leaves, and which is being shown here in that language, in that time some calculations. And if you look at the way we do the drawing today, like your elevation, plan view, and side view, it was there at that time, but unfortunately that is not being talked about, being taught to our people even in engineering. For that record, which I could manage to get from the work of Michel, who had published a book on 1988, and this record really shows the list of workmen, their salaries, rules of conduct, provides an account of several years of various temple building operations. Of course, this leaflet was obtained basically from 17th century, not the 12th century documents could be traced out because of so many years of dependent and also ruled by the foreigners. Then lot of things are being destroyed, and the palm leaf inscriptions from a manuscript showing architect calculation on a proportional section with height and mandala. Let me show you a temple. This is basically elevation of a temple, and this is a plan view or the mandala. So, if you look at, and we do use this mandala in pujas, like, but I was not knowing that mandala means basically plan view, and once I started looking at this maybe 2-3 years back, then I learned, oh, mandala means plan view. So, that is the things what is shown here. It is very very intricate shapes are being drawn in the palm leaves. If you look at, there are some various numbers are given, maybe some dimensioning and other things, and this palm leaves is basically dated back to 17th century kind of thing. That means the drawing what we use today, the engineering drawing was prevalent in our country as we have built a lot of temples, but unfortunately it has not been discussed as part of any engineering book to the best of my knowledge till now. So that people should feel proud that our ancestors were aware about the engineering drawing. So let us look at the construction process of which were having a variation and flexibility they were having. So if you look at both the temple construction in the temple construction in both southern and northern India, which I had discussed earlier, follow the similar procedure leading up to the construction of temple, but however there will be slight differences occur due to variability of material used for construction, the climate, the availability of human resources or social structure of particular period. There is a lot of variation in architectures. I had discussed earlier the Nagara style of architecture, then Dravida type of architecture, Kalinga style of architecture, temple architectures. Those are different, but the temple construction will be similar. What I am trying to discuss here is general type, which can be common to both. Let us look at some of the processes which are being done in recent time for developing the temples using the stone. And this is a place where the stone will be basically kept, and these people are craftsmen, and they perform lot of rituals also before starting. These are the rituals being performed, and generally we receive the tools which are important for carrying out the construction work of the temple or any other construction, as a matter of fact. And they of course take food together and they work together. They are having a group which they do that. If you look at the earlier days, the people were working in a group, unlike the today. People are more individuals, and there was also the craftsman guild, what the people are saying. The groups are like corporate body of modern days, combining both the families and individual workers. And that is the beauty of that. We always think a group in terms of family relationships, which is very, very emotional and also the very strong bond. And that was the part of our Indian culture, but today it is lacking. We are more mechanical in nature, and the association had a fixed rules of work, salaries, completion time of the work and prices, and there is a lot of rules and the regulations were there to have a good control over the people, and they followed own judicial privileges, control and social life of the members, also could expel a disobedient member after of course discussing with them. The members travel from one region to another to work on different projects and spread the artistic and architectural tradition throughout the history of the temple construction, and that is a lot of evidence are there for this thing. And during the rainy season, generally they take leave from their the temple building work, and they go back to their own native place and then work. And besides this, proper law and order was maintained, and internal disputes were sorted out after deliberation, and fines were charged as a punishment for delay in work and delivery of materials and work completion, because suppose you won't complete the work in stipulated time, then you will have to pay some penalty. It is not like that you will go on saying that some kind of excuses. The people who quarried and transported the stone to the site, the blacksmiths, the carpenters, the sculptors, and various other services providers were associated with the erection of temple, and it is not a one man's work. There is various kinds of people with different skills have to be work together. It is a joint venture, and it is not only the men who are working for the construction of temple. The women are also engaged for cleaning and polishing stones and the lighter work what they can manage to do, and that indicates the dignity of women at that time. According to me, the women were considered part and parcel of any human activities in ancient days, and unfortunately today we are not taking in that spirit. Also, there was a provision to replace the artist or a worker with another in case of death, illness or accidents or some other reasons, as being stated by Hardy, who was written a beautiful book on the construction of Hindu temple. And as I told, there was a guild or association, and that association was basically meant to take care of the people by providing training to the young persons and students, not in separate school the way we do in modern days. For example, in engineering colleges we train the engineers, but without really giving much exposure to the practical aspect of engineering. Rather, what they were doing, they were giving training to the students, a young generation, on the project site itself and where the work being executed under the supervision of experienced skilled persons, and they might be giving some also theoretical aspect of the temple construction, and which were there in ancient manual, knowledge of geometry, history, measurements and drawings. So, beside this, they were also teaching at that time knowledge of music, dance and yoga, because these are the part and parcel of Hindu temple earlier days. Therefore, that has to be also looked at how it can be a part and parcel of the sculptures, and then it will be written down or placed on the walls or on the roofs of the temples. Generally, the training time was spanned over almost 10 years, and when they had acquired enough knowledge, they were asked to go and find out the work on a bigger or prestigious projects, so that they can establish themselves. The temple construction team consists of 4 types of people, and their heads are basically known as Tapati, Sutragai, Takshaka and Bardakin. So, these are the people who will be aiding each group, and team followed the instruction of Stapaka, and who is head architect's priest. Basically, he is the person who will be under his leadership, all these 4 heads will be working. There is a hierarchical systems at the time for making the temple construction, and selection of the team generally is being done is firstly the main architect, the Stapati, is selected, and it might be selected by the Stapaka and also the person who will be sponsoring this project. And Stapati, generally the king or the minister. The Stapati should have complete knowledge of Silpa Shastras and the traditional sciences and mathematics and Puranas, which is basically, according to us, is a historical book of our civilization, and paintings, music and yoga. So, he should be capable enough to direct the construction to all the other members engaged in the construction of work, because he should have a command over the not only the knowledge, he must be knowing the how to manage the people and give the proper instruction at the proper time. So, a managerial skill is a must for the Stapati, and he must have overall knowledge of the entire construction work of temple. And Stapati should be kind, joyous and free from hatred and jealousy, truthful with control over senses, focused in mind, also free from greed, carelessness, disease. So, these are the qualities which are being really considered for selecting a Sthapati, because he is basically the head of all skilled people. And Sthapaka is also selected by patron, generally the king or the minister of a particular thing, or a rich person who will be sponsoring this kind of activities of making temple construction. He should also be well versed with the Silpa Shastra and perform the architectural rites correctly, because at that time the rites were to be performed properly, and that was very important before making a temple. And Sthapati and Sthapaka have to work together, and the construction started by two should be continued by them only, unless otherwise under some special condition when they are not available at the work place, or due to some disease or due to some urgent requirements, and that power should be delegated to an equivalent person who must be a disciple of those who will be faithful to them. So, that is the kind of thing was really being followed at that time. I am just showing some figure here, the Sthapati who is looking after all the work, and this person is basically Sthapati, and this person basically Sutragrahi, who is doing this kind of drawing and then drawing the lines, and Taksaka, who is taking care of sculpting the thing, and then Bharadaka, the carpenter, who will be looking at the dimensioning and other their respective work. So, generally the Sutragai is the disciple or the son of Sthapati, that is also the family comes into picture, and whose role is to perform all the work assigned by the Sthapati. So, if you look at the main executive is the Sutragai, who will be following the instruction given by Sthapati, and also he should have knowledge of layout and proportionate measurements like vertical, horizontal, chord and rod, by the chord and rod. These are these two tools were being used at that time. And the Taksa is the cutter of the stone, and the other materials who cuts the curves the large pieces and do the subtle detail, and should be able to do the work on own initiative, also the follow the instruction given by the Sthapati. So, and also he is the head of the stone cutters, and who will be looking after all the things. There might be several people under him who will be cutting the stones and then various other works. The Vardakin is the mason or the carpenter who fits and places the stone together what Taksasa has carved, and by adding the finished work he also follows the instruction of Sutragai. See, there is a proper order, flow of order given, and then that has to be followed. So, team of all four heads like Sthapati, Sutragai, Taksaka and Vardin work together with other workmen in the construction of temple, and absence of by one can cause the disruption in the process of construction. So, therefore, they always will be there and they take the charges. And let us now look at the stages of construction. Generally, the construction of temple lasts for decades in 3 stages. The first stage is planning of the temple, the selection and examination of site is a very important aspect, and then later on layouts and measurements are to be carried out, and the selection of materials, particularly the stones and other materials related to the construction of temple are to be considered, and then quarry of stones and various kinds of stone will be were used earlier days, and that has to be also looked at. which stones to be used at what places, and orientation of the temple, list of parts of the temple, components, and allocation of the work. That is a very important. Basically, you will have to allocate the various works to different kinds of people, and layout of the temple on the site has to be carried out in the first phase. And second stage is the carving of different parts of temple structures. Of course, before that you will have to do the drawing and detail the way we do might be in present day. They might have having all the calculation drawings might have fixed before really this thing. And carving and cutting of the stones was one of the very important work in the second stage, and construction with brick, stone or timber. The Taksaka instructed the sculptors and Silpis to carve out various parts according to the drawing specification guidelines given to them. And the third stage is basically assembling parts of the temple. The actual construction of temple will start from this, and this is basically all other things are preparations. And let us look at the stage 1 site selection, preparation of construction. The selection of the site is very important because if you look at the load of a temple will be quite high, unlike the modern buildings. So, therefore, the site has to be selected properly, so that it will not really slump down with the load due to the piling of the stones of heavy weight, some kind of lakhs of tons of stones which will be placed in one place. So, that is a very important thing, labeling of the site, and labeling of site was done very considerable way, and of course, it has done very systematic way of different layers, and then they will be allowing the elephant to move and then also give some water. They will allow it to settle down for a few years, not that one day, so that the load it will be sturdy enough to take the load of the temple. Orientation and measurements and layout. The selection of material, as I told, is a very important, because there are so many stones, and then you will have to quarry the stone from a shorter distance, so that the transportation won't be a problem. And then how to carry these heavy stones from the quarrying site to the place of construction is a very important aspect. And carvings on the temple, which was a very tedious work, and whether the stones which you are taken, which was chosen, being carved out or not, that is another question. And the cutting and carving of stone, so drawing in the stone itself, and polishing of the stones, and tools and equipments had to be also fabricated, and you will have to also decide what kind of tools you will be using and how to take care of that. And stage 3 is the process of temple building, laying the foundation, which is a very tedious work, and then it has to be done properly. Assembling of elements, because that joining, numbering of each part is a very important. Joinery system, what kind of joints will be used. Then there is a plinth, one has to look at how to take care of that, and walls, what kind of style you will have to use. Column and beams, what is the diameter, what is the length, and then various parts of columns. The mandapas and sikhara is a very important aspect, because the load distribution is basically controlled by the sikhara or amalaka, which will be on the top of the sikhara. And then there is a dimensional analysis which they might have done. And I know at least earlier days the people were making a prototype, and then they were learning and then do that the way we do in modern time. So, as I told, let us look at orientation or the layout as per the Vastu Shastras. The Ratha is a facet or a vertical offset projection on the plan of a sanctum, as I had mentioned earlier. It is generally carried off from the bottom of the temple structure to the superstructure, the main sanctum, and depending on the number of projections, Rath can be classified. Eka Ratha means one Ratha, the 3 Ratha, one projection each side, and Pancha Ratha, 2 projections, on each side, and Saptarasa is corresponding to the 3 projection on each side, and Navaratha is the 4 projection on the east side. So, I had discussed that. Let me just mention that in the Ekaratha, this is the way that there will be no projection, it is just a square. If you start with a square, it will be like that, and in the 3 Ratha there will be one projection outside. This is one side and this is the another side, one projection, and this is the basically projection. This is the one projection, second projection, and that is the third projection. So, on the basically 3 projections are being made on each side. Other side, generally this will be your way entrance to this temple, to this Garbhagriha, if you look at. Similarly, the Pancharatha is having 2 projection on each side. If you look at 3 Ratha, as I told, this is a projection. So, therefore, you can say 1, 2, 3, and then also 3 on this side, this is on the 3 on this side, and whereas the Pancharatha you can say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, similarly, it is also 5 steps, and in the Saptaratha there will be 7 steps on each side, and therefore, that is being has to be decided like which one you want to have, and then of course, that depends on your height and depends on several factors, and also the shape what it looks to be, and the load what it will be taking. So, quarrying of the stone, if you look at using the wooden wedges, generally question arises how they were really cutting the stone from the mountain. That was a very big question, what might be, because the tool whatever it was available was not good enough to really cut the stone, which is very hard, particularly granites and other sandstones and other things. And they using the, what people are saying, they using the wooden or the metal wedges that were driven into the rocks and then weighted to cause expansion, and this in turn causes the rocks to crack, but crack in a very controlled manner, which is very important, and then they can be cut by application of pressure, and then that can be dressed so that that can be used. So, if you look at these are the picture something which are shown, these are the mountains, and then one has to cut from this thing, and people are also lifting the stones with the help of shaft and roll over it, and it is a very tedious task and also very quite risky. So, this is the pictures what has been shown here, present day quarry site and process of quarrying the stones. And so, let us look at how the people might have cutting the granite from the monolith in the mountain itself. The series of holes is basically being drilled along the line to be split using a chisel. For example, there will be various chisel here, these are chisels, right, and that will be in the series along with this line, that will be basically first you will draw the line and then put this chisels and hammer it, and generally 3 men hit the iron chisel in turns with sledgehammers in sequentially, and of course, more people can have. The series of these holes is driven along the line in a consecutive order as I have shown here, and these are well lubricated with water for few hours, and then of course, after this once you get some kind of a cut, then you can put a wedge, and then that is being pounded by the sledgehammer, like it is being, this is a sledgehammer which is being the peg or the wedge which is being placed. You can see there is a crack which is occurring along the line, along the peg's line, and so if you look at the cutaway view of the wedge is shown here with the seams, and then if it is you are giving the pressure here, then what will happen, you will try to spread it, expand the stone, and such that it will be the crack will occur. So, when the wedges are all driven in deep enough, the stone is forced to apart and breaks starts to split along the line of holes, and by that they can manage to do. Of course, there are several ways of doing it. I have just shown one of them, which is considered to be the correct according to researcher. So, transportation of material was a very big issue. When you think of such a big stone, they could manage to transport. Of course, the like modern days, your cranes and other facilities were not there. The transportation of the stones from quarries to the building site was done on a wooden rollers. As I have told, these are wooden rollers, and the people were doing, and these stones were drawn by elephants and or maybe floated in the wood barrage along the rivers and canals. These are the all speculation what we are doing. I think they might have done these things. So, if you look at cutting and carving of the stone, see, cutting is okay, but carving is a really very slow and tedious process, and which requires a lot of patience. And today we do not have patience to even listen to the lecture or to do something. And single wrong strike of hammer could spoil thousands of hours of work. If you are impatient, then you can spoil just within a fraction of a second. A smallest piece like a railing of staircase may take approximately a month of manual work, but if you are now carving it and you spoil it, it looks very bad, and then it is very difficult to really repair it. And carving is being carried out in different phases corresponding task of the different craftsmen. One team of stone mason will cut the stone block to the appropriate size. Another team of carvers will give stone to a basic shape, whatever is required. Then finally, the sculptors give them a final form. Different kinds of skilled people will be using in phases so that things will be done, and they will do only those work. So, let us look at how it is being done in modern time. Like this is the person who is basically cutting the stones block to appropriate size. This is a stone block, and then another team will be trying to give a final shape, and then you can cut the whatever is required sculptures, and then this is a person who is making these tools, and also this dimensioning is being done, and finally you will get a very nice shape of a part of the temple. And joining system of each stone is pre-decided. See, that is a very important, how they were doing that at that time. Today, in spite of our very good technologies and other marking process, but still we are making a lot of problem when we are assembling the various components. And rough joinery details are prepared simultaneously. Of course, this is the procedure what people are saying. We are just thinking they might be doing earlier. The latter during the time of assembly, according to requirement, the details are made from fine and corrected to make proper joints. If you look at, this is also one shape, and on the top of it will be also putting another similar structures, which may be a pillar. So, if you look at, this is basically the mortician and tenon joint, and mortician and the tenon part is here. So, a drawing of the stone is also very important. The 5 fine carvings on the stone depend on the precise drawings, and the person must have an artistic bent of mind. Drawings on the stones were made by sharpened coal and piece, sharpened bamboo pencils, also may be made out of pencil out of iron. And if you look at, these are the being shown the sharpened coal pieces. These are basically coal pieces, and these are sharpened bamboo. And first you will have to do a drawing here in the sketch, and then after that of course you will have to, these bamboo pencils are dipped in any of coloring agents such as lime, ink or red oxide for marking on the sketches, like it is being done here, marking on stones. And then the long straight lines are marked by soaking the thread in coloring agents, and then the stretching from one end to another and then snapped it. That way it is also being practiced. For example, these lines has to be done in this process, and after that you will have to use the tools for carving it very patiently. And after every phase of carving, more lines are made for the carvers to detail the stones. That means, it goes in sequential manner, so that no mistake is being done. So carving of stone, if you look at, I have shown here, it is so intricate, is a very difficult and very painstaking job. The carving begins with the chiseling away of large chunks of redundant rock, which is known as knocking off, and this is carried out using a pointed chisel and a vase sharp piece chisel, and with the mason driving the hammer. And marking as to the drawing on the stone are made with charcoal and pencil, the sharp bamboo on the stone, as I had mentioned earlier. Several types of specific chisels and hammers are being used to create a final figure. Some of them I have shown here, like tooth claws, and then a flat one. This is the flat, and then bull nose chisels, and then pointed. The several kinds can be, a chisel can be made according to their requirement. They were designing their own chisel and using it. The tools, if you look at basic tools like hammers, various kinds of hammers, various kinds of chisels are used for cutting and carving of the stones. And particularly the tools were made locally in ancient time, and also being sharpened regularly in earlier in the workyard by the blacksmiths, and according to their need they were designing the tool. Unlike in modern days, the tools are available in market and then use that. If you look at even today, those people who working on stone temple, they do develop their own tools and they do use. Stage 3 is the foundation of temple is approximately 2-meter deep pit, and the pit is dug throughout the base, is wider than the base of the temple, and the foundation below the sanctuary is generally fully packed with stones, placed one stone above other. For example, it is being stone, but this is not really good foundation according to me, but I didn't get really any foundation pictures, and because that will be deep inside and nobody really could manage to get that foundation below the. And this is the place where the people do use this curd to mark the lines of before really foundation occurring. And at the base of the foundation, on the exact center of the garbhagriha, a hollow duct is placed running from the foundation base to the base of main idol of the temple for performing rituals called garbhadana, because this is a very important part which is being done during the construction of the temple or during the laying of foundation of the temple construction. So, therefore, another thing is the assembly of elements, the final and the most important stage. And after carving of the individual pieces is completed, different levels of temples with its different parts are pre-assembled to check the accuracy of joints, avoid any misfit during the time of placing the part at its actual position in the temple. See, this is a very really tedious task, and how they were managing without really error is a big question which is coming in my mind. And so, this is the figure in the modern days how they are doing. They are being numbered properly. These numbers are given here, and they will be placing each other so that they will be assemble it. But at that time, how they are doing. They will be basically using some number, but how good it is, where they will be keeping the records and then data, so that they can retrieve it, because the work was going on for years together. After the corrections, the parts are transported to the main site of the temple construction from the work yard. That is being followed today. Maybe it was followed earlier time, I do not know. The different parts of the temple are carved in India and transported to another place off land. Whether it is correct or not, really it is a question to be explored further. And let us say that some theory about assembling, how they were doing. There are various ways people were thinking about, because these are the stones of few tons. So therefore, how they are lifting, how they are assembling is a really very difficult thing to imagine at this moment, because of course we can do today with the help of crane, but there is no crane at that time. So therefore, how they are managing is the question. So some people say the curved parts of the temple are erect into their exact position by rope and pulley on the scaffoldings. That is the one theory what people have put forwarded. The another is that people were using the ramps made of timber and sand to ease the placing of heavy members, so that through the ramp they will take the stone and assemble. Even if you take through the ramps to the very higher height, but how we will put it there, that is another question. The earlier remains of ramps are found near the temple of Brihadeeswara in Tanjore, which we had discussed, and this was constructed to this ramp, whatever it is remain the ramp, some portion of this ramp is found, that was constructed to carry the 80-ton final stone to the height of 60 meter, what people are claiming. In the present day construction, the temple builders use chain and pulley, derrick pole and cranes to place the parts together in the exact position, as I had mentioned earlier. And some people are having view that people are using water power to assemble the stones, heavy stones, and some people are proposing to have a windmill to assemble. Of course, the elephant might be used for lifting the stones and also assembling them, and pulley a capstan with manila rope might have used, what people are thinking. But this theory is not really well established, just people are giving ideas and then we will have to look at it. Let us now look at how they were assembling the temple, because the height of the temple was quite high, even order of something 150 to 220 feet kind of things. So if you look at two proposals is being talked about here. One is this is a straight ramp, and this is a spiral ramp. And which is the right, we do not know, but people are saying that this straight ramp may be the right one. But if you consider that, then for a 226 feet, if you take some angle which is a smaller one, so that the elephant and other people can really move, then it will take some 8 kilometers of 8-kilometer ramp is required to take the stone to the top of the temple of 1216 feet. And of course, how they were doing, if it is a straight ramp, then that means the ramp will be around the temple, around this temple the ramp will be there, and which is really very huge. Now, how much of sand is required and all those things, I will show you a little bit calculation. But again, now if you do that, how you will be placing the stone and in which order is the one big questions. And even in the spiral one, that angle also is important, and one has to number it properly, so that you will be working in this way, otherwise it will be very difficult to really do that. So because you will have to initially make this ramp and then put this stones, and then you make all this ramp in a gradual manner, such that you can do whenever you are doing the spiral one. Now, even the straight one, what you will do, how you will do this thing, this means this ramp has to be done slowly around the temple, or it will be done in the one way, then finish it, you will go to another angle and then put the stone. See, these are all these questions are there, and for which more research is to be required. And then if you look at this is the how the assembly will be doing is the inner one, inner stone, and then there will be outer stone layer, and this is your inner stone layer. Now, this generally two layers are being used, and it says that the stone should not fall inside or it should not fall outside. Now, those things has to be taken care. Of course, if it is a filled with the sand outside, then it will not fall here, but however inside it can fall. Then if it will fall down, then how will take care of that? All these measures might have been properly planned and executed properly, otherwise this temple building could have not really successful. Let me just discuss with you, right. If it is the height of the temple, this is the temple height of 228 feet and having 15 degree. If you look at, if you go to the top, then it is something 848 feet. Now, if I am having 45 degree, which we cannot really, because 45 degree is too big angle to really go, and then you cannot really do that, go to height, then you need 228 feet. And even if you go for 15 degree also is too big, but if you go for this, the land for this kind of temple height of 228 feet, you need something. If it is 45 degree angle, then you need sand requirements which is a little smaller as compared to 15 was something around 20 CFT. If you take one truck of sand, one truck contains 200 CFT of sand, then you need something 9,325 trucks. And if you will go for 15 degree angle, which is moderate one, generally you will go for 7 or 5 kind of thing, then you need something land coverage of 52 acres of the sand, and which requires something 1 crore 30 lakhs of trucks of sands. How they are getting those sands or the mud from that and do that? It is a really gigantic activities or the task to be executed at that time. So, therefore, this theory has to be looked at it, that whether this is correct or not. Joinery system, as I was mentioning earlier, the timber and bamboo architecture were basically earlier was available in India, and then stone construction came later on. Maybe the stone construction was basically done by the same similar joinery system which was used in timber and bamboo architecture. The timber joinery system was followed to assemble all the parts of the temple together. Today also the joints are made with accuracy of 1/6 of an inch. The ancient manuals explain different types of assemblies, proportion and usage of these joints. I will be talking about 3 kinds of joints. One is mortise and tenon joints. This is your basically mortise, and this is your tenon, and there is a lap joints which is one place here, another, this is the lap joints, and there is a mortise and tenon joint with a peg which is being used basically for the joining the stones, such that it will not be separated under the lateral loads. Generally, for vertical structures, this mortise and tenon joint is being used, lap joint being used for the horizontal structures. So, if you look at, I had shown you this figure, this is basically the mortise and tenon joint, this is the tenon part, and then mortise part will be on the top of it, each one of them being, and this is the old temple structure which I have shown here. This is built on the mortise and tenon joints here, right. And as I had mentioned earlier, the mortise and tenon joints were mostly used for the vertical assembly, and lap joints were used for horizontal assembly. Mortise and tenon joint with a peg is fixed between 2 mortise cart mortar is cut out in two different stones, and this joint is usually used between two courses of masonry to avoid the movement of stones due to lateral forces, because lateral forces there, then you will have to use this kind of mortar and tenon joint with a peg. And if you look at generally the most of the temple structures were built by the stone without any binders, but however, in maybe later stage in some places people do use the natural binders to unite the joints together, but nowadays of course people are using cement which act as a binding agents. But earlier days the people were making the stone polished to such an extent, and also they are using some peg mortars and tenon joints, so that they will be joined without any binders. So, columns and beam, ancient columns was a monolithic in nature, but later on people have used basically column with 5 different parts, all are interlocked by the mortars and tenon joints. Let us look at like the way these are being done here. So, these are basically the mortise part, and then this has been lifted, the shaft which is being lifted nowadays, and it is being placed on this. This is a basically shaft which is being placed to in the lower part, and the 5 parts of course later on it was developed. The 5 parts consist of 2 parts on the base, 1 parts as the shaft, and 2 as the capital of the column. So, these are the things which I have shown here is basically columns kind of things, and this is the beam which is people are making it, and this is the tenon part of the mortise and tenon joints. There will on the top of it there will be a shaft. So, generally the top of the column are brackets like here, which is act like a cantilever. On the top of it generally the beam is being, this is your beam, and this is the column, and beam are placed over the column structure with further supports the roofing system of the temple. It is not that nowadays we are making the column and beam structures, but in ancient time in temple people were using the beam and columns for constructing the temples. So, there are various kinds of columns which are being designed, but I will show you 3 of them. One is bell type column, which I have shown here. This is its load bearing capacity is quite low, whereas a cushion type is having a little medium level, and this portion is having 5 parts. If you look at, this is the first part, and this is second part, and this is the shaft which is the third part, and this is the fourth part, and this is your fifth part. So, the Ghata Pallava type column is being used very much, and it is having a lot of carvings on it, and if you look at, there are various kind. This is your shaft, this is your shaft, and these are various parts are being shown here, and this is the beam which is known as Uttara, and then this is the plate, splatter plates, and this is a mala, and then and various parts are there. This is basically, this is the fourth part, and this is your third part. Let me conclude with few concluding remarks. That database of architecture, technology, other aspect of ancient temples should be prepared well and also preserved, so that we can learn from that and also take care of it. Preservation of present structure through our indigenous technology by proper training to people instead of hiring people from foreign countries should be carried out, otherwise we will be in trouble. and appropriate training should be given to engineers for maintaining this present structure which are being used by various people, and all aspects of engineering, technology, architecture, management related to the temple building and its maintenance should be included in the curriculum, so that we will get enough technical personnel to maintain and repair our ancient temples. More research work on temple construction should be undertaken in a serious manner, such that we can preserve our temple and also use them for future. Thank you very much.